how do you process from an economic policy perspective what just happened as the election occurred? Does it change the outlook? What do you see for policy? Things like that.
Look, I'd start with this. Uh, Inflation is a really toxic thing. Joe Biden's is the third Democratic presidency in the last 75 years to have ended with a substantial shift towards the right in American politics. The first was Lyndon Johnson's presidency. The second was Jimmy Carter's presidency. Both of those were substantially implicated by inflation. And I think it's very clear from all the exit polling and the discussion that fairly or unfairly, rightly or wrongly, the fact that prices were judged to be substantially higher than they had been 4 years ago, and that interest rates, the cost of money, are substantially higher than they were 4 years ago, was probably the single most important factor shaping votes. So it seems to me that any administration going forward has to take the measure of that and recognize that the American evidence, and indeed the evidence all over the world, is that electorates are unforgiving where inflationary errors are concerned. Obviously, in thinking about what happened in the election, there were a set of developments having to do, or non-developments having to do with immigration that were very important, and very much a cultural sense that the party that talks the most about the middle class had, through a variety of values choices it made, lost its connection to the middle class. So that's how I interpret what happened. And now it will be for political actors in Washington to make their policy judgments and for investors to assess what's likely. It seems to me, looking at it from their point of view, that a central lesson that the Trump administration and president and his advisors should be learning from what happened is the political toxicity of inflation. And that should lead them to want to be very cautious about any policy program, whatever its other merits, that is likely to be experienced by voters as inflationary. And I have to say, there's a lot, it seems to me, and this is not a political judgment, it's an analytical economic judgment. Seems to me there's a great deal in what was talked about during the campaign that raises questions about inflation. But what do you think, Glenn?
I would agree with that broadly, Larry. I think the big lessons really were, first and foremost, inflation, or more aptly put, higher prices. I think the public got frustrated when economists and government officials said, well, inflation's coming down. And people say, well, the prices are still too high. I think that was very, very toxic. And I think the lack of connection to kitchen table issues, inflation is one, but others, just employment opportunities and things like that. So I think that's the really big lesson. In terms of public policy, while I'm always skeptical because I'm an economist, I feel very optimistic for prospects of a Trump presidency on economics. Indeed, I see there's a chance for what I would call an awakening in policy, an awakening meaning take sort of more traditional conservative policies, but make them broader and more inclusive. So I do think the Trump administration has opportunities in growth. I think they have opportunities in tax policy. We'll come to that. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act has to be looked at. The skepticism I might have would be temptations toward very high use of tariffs or other protectionist policies. But I think economic policy is up for grabs. The one caution I'd remind viewers is, even with a almost sure now GOP sweep, the majorities are not such that they're error proof. So there are lots of compromises that will need to be made in public policy. But I think there's a real opening for President Trump if he and his team choose to take it.